Hi guys, happy Sunday. So this is your astrological forecast for the upcoming week, starting from today, tomorrow, however you start your week. And this one will include the upcoming lunar eclipse, the last eclipse in the sign of Taurus, the full moon in Taurus, which will be coming up on Saturday the 28th, but we'll get to it later on in this interpretation of transit, if you can call it that way. And yeah, I'm not quite sure how this is going to go because I was getting some breadcrumbs from the universe and it pointed me to certain directions, so this might be a little bit of an unusual video, but let's just try to stick to the to the transits. So anyway, let's just start with today, because today there is a lot happening in the sky. Today we are experiencing Venus. Today is Sunday, by the way. Today we are experiencing Venus trining Jupiter. This is something that will still be active during the time of the eclipse. Venus, as we might remember, squared Jupiter 3 times during the summertime. First time they were both direct, second time Venus was retrograde, and the third time, and still Jupiter is retrograde at the moment until the end of the year. Today also Moon is moving into the sign of Aquarius, so we'll start in a new week with Moon in the sign of Aquarius, so a little bit of a detachment. And also today Mercury is moving into the sign of Scorpio. So this will be a very different way of thinking, communicating, and identifying reality. Scorpio is very different from Libra because, as we know, Scorpio is a feminine energy and is very deep. It's very intense. It also doesn't want to make itself vulnerable, but it understands that the only way to be intimate with someone is to have to expose itself. So it's a very interesting place for Mercury to be. Mercury will remain in a sign of Scorpio until November 10th, when it will move into the sign of Sagittarius. As we know, Mercury doesn't hang around for very long anywhere unless it's retrograde. So also later on today, Mercury will make a trine to Saturn retrograde in Pisces. So today Mercury is super busy. Tomorrow Sun will move into the sign of Scorpio. So tomorrow on Monday we are officially starting the Scorpio season. On Tuesday, Sun will trine Saturn, so it will be following after Mercury because they already had a conjunction a few days ago. And and all of these transits that I'm naming are going to be active during the upcoming lunar eclipse, the full moon in Taurus that we are experiencing on upcoming Saturday. So on Tuesday also Moon will move into the sign of Pisces. That will be right after Sun made a trine to Saturn. Obviously Moon in Pisces will conjunct Saturn. On Thursday, there is nothing much happening as far as I know on Wednesday. No, it's just Moon making what she's doing. You know, she's going to be obviously trining Mars and sextiling Jupiter and opposing Venus and sextiling Uranus. So Moon is always busy. You know, like we could spend the entire video just talking about Moon, but we need to move on because we have a lot to talk about. So yeah, so on Thursday, Moon is moving into the sign of Aries, and then on Friday, Sun is sextiling Juno. Actually, Thursday also Mercury is making a trine to Vesta, but like I mentioned many times before, I don't work with asteroids, so just to name those. And then on Saturday, Moon is, of course, moving into the sign of Taurus, preparing for the eclipse. And just before that takes place, we'll have the exact opposition between Mars in Scorpio and Jupiter retrograde in Taurus. So as we know, Mars is associated with the North Node because Mars is the ruler, and Jupiter is currently ruled by the ruler of the South Node, Venus, and until recently Venus was also the ruler of Mars. And Venus and Mars are kind of, they've been dancing around each other since summer and trying to make some aspect to each other, but they're not going to have a conjunction until Aquarius season. So anyway, this is beside the point. Then actually, right after the eclipse, because for us here in Central Europe, the eclipse will be taking place at 20 to 24, so 10:24 p.m. And this is just before the clock goes back, because on Saturday night, going from Saturday night to Sunday morning, 28th, 29th, there will be a clock change for us here in Europe. I know for you guys in the US, it's going to be the week later, the first weekend of November, but for us it's happening this weekend. So it's interesting that the clock is going backwards right after this last eclipse in Taurus, which is interesting. And yeah, and then on Sunday, after the clock had moved, well, actually for some of you guys, it's going to be still on Saturday night. For you across the Atlantic, guys in America. Mercury will be opposing Jupiter, so Mercury is very, very, very fast catching up with Mars. And then actually later on Sunday the 29th, Mercury will conjunct Mars finally, because again during the Virgo season, when both Mercury and Mars were in the sign of Virgo, they were so close, and a lot of people thought they were going to have a conjunction, but they didn't, because Mercury station entered retrograde and Mars moved on into the sign of Libra. So the exact conjunction between Mercury and Mars, it's happening in the sign of Scorpio on Sunday the 29th. And then actually the following week, just again to mention, because this is something that's going to be present during the eclipse, we'll have the Venus trine to Uranus, which will be taking place on the 31st. And that's on Tuesday, the Tuesday after. So, okay, so we've got all these transits going on. To be honest, I don't really feel overly guided to go into too much of a depth about these transits, because they are all going to be part of the eclipse. So, to be honest, I really feel that let's just dive straight into the eclipse. As I mentioned, we have two planets changing sign, and that is Mercury today moving into the sign of Scorpio, and Sun moving into the Scorpio tomorrow, which will start the Scorpio season. So, the upcoming eclipse is actually under a very different energy from the solar eclipse in Libra, because it was all the masculine energy, the solar, the Libra, obviously Libra being an air sign, so all that is shifting. Now we go into feminine energy again, Scorpio season, a lot of water, a lot of emotion, very psychic. Of course, November in many cultures, it's I know in Mexico, where I'm actually heading on November 2nd, they are celebrating the day of the death, right? And of course, for a lot of people in the world, they're celebrating Halloween on the 31st, which is interesting because that's the day Venus going to be trining Uranus. So very interesting, all these things that are coming up and playing out with all these dates. And actually on the 2nd, there'll be something happening as well. I'm pretty sure that I put something down. But anyway, let's get to the eclipse. So this eclipse for us here in Europe, as I mentioned, it's going to happen at 10:24 p.m. and this is Central European time. Well, you know, the saving time, because as I mentioned, a few hours after the clock is going to go back for us here in Europe, and it's happening on 5 degrees and 9 minutes. And this is going to happen right on my sun. Hello. So let's see what happens with that. But this is a partial lunar eclipse, just to mention. And of course, I'm going to dive into all these aspects that it's going to be making, but I think important thing to mention is where it all began. So the first eclipse in the sign of Taurus, we actually had on November 19th, 2021. And in that time, the nodes were still in Gemini and Sagittarius, which is very interesting because we started and we finishing the Taurus Scorpio axis eclipses, while the nodes are actually in a completely different sign. Because now, as we have this last lunar eclipse in sign of Taurus, the nodes are already in Aries and Libra. So obviously there is, as I've been talking about, there is all this stuff happening simultaneously. The old energy is ending and new energy has already started, but it not necessarily manifested yet. So the first eclipse in the sign of Taurus happened in November 2021 on 27 degrees 40 minutes of Taurus, and the nodes were on 1 degree 42 minutes Gemini and Sagittarius. The second eclipse in Taurus, which was actually the first new moon, the solar eclipse, the new moon in Taurus happened on April 30th, 2022 on 10 degrees 28 minutes of Taurus, and the nodes were 22 degrees and 52 minutes. And now we're having this eclipse happening, as I already mentioned, 5 degrees 9 minutes Taurus, and the nodes are on 24 degrees and 55 minutes. So things are definitely moving forward with the nodes getting deeper into the sign of Aries and Libra, and all these things are getting triggered with regards to Libra and Aries themes, as we had experienced since the time that the last eclipse took place, with regards to what's been happening in the world. Of course, a lot of Martian energy, a lot of anger, Libra bringing to the surface all these imbalances in our relationship. And also, as we've experienced just a few days ago, we had the new phase conjunction with Sun and the South Node, Mercury and the South Node, Sun and the Mercury getting together as well, starting a new cycle between the two, which is happening like every 2-3 months. So there is a lot happening in the sky, and this eclipse, as I mentioned, is the last one of these axes, but happening on the back of the at the same time as the nodes being in Aries and Libra, which is all about new beginning, which is about the shift that is meant to lead to the balance. But in order for us to find this balance, we have to re-experience what kept us in balance. And actually, I have the charts for the eclipses during November 21 and 22. And the thing that really stands out for me, the first eclipse that happened in Taurus on November 2021, was that, of course, Saturn was still in the sign of Aquarius. Jupiter was actually in the sign of Aquarius. There was a new phase between Saturn and Jupiter. Jupiter was square in the nodes. Resolution was the south node in the sign of Sagittarius. It was the out of sign square, but it was still within a degree. And Jupiter was the ruler. Jupiter, the ruler of the south node, was square in the south node. So it's all about this perception of reality. How do we perceive reality? What is the story? What is the so-called truth? Because as I've been saying so many times before, there are very few things that are universal truth, that are applicable to everyone and are the truth for everyone. Very few things. Most of the things are subjective perceptions of reality. So this first eclipse in the sign of Taurus in 2021, November 2021, happened with both Mercury and Mars in a closing phase to Sun, because that was, of course, a lunar eclipse. So Sun and Moon were in opposition. So Mercury and Mars were in a closing phase to Sun. Mercury was in a new phase conjunction with with Mars, which is interesting because Mercury and Mars are going to have a conjunction a day after. A day after. So at the time, 2021, Mercury was in a new phase. It was ahead of a Mars. And now, a day later, after this eclipse, Mercury is going to conjunct Mars, which means there is in balsamic phase conjunction. So again, whatever Mercury was accumulating informations for, and this was already in a sign of Scorpio as well, now it's coming to culmination, because this way of identifying reality, describing reality, is not working. It's not supporting us. This story is over, because now Jupiter is actually retrograde in the sign of Taurus. And it's going to also play a role. I dive into the aspects with regards to this eclipse in a moment. But I really want to create a baseline, because everything happens in cycles. And obviously this is a last eclipse in this Taurus, Scorpio-Taurus axis, but it started with Taurus, it's ending with Taurus. So we really have to look at what was going on during this time of this Taurus eclipse that happened in November 2021, and where everything was. And to me, it's fascinating that this Mercury-Mars were in a closing phase to the Sun. Now they are in a new phase. Mercury is in a closing phase to Mars, but it will have a conjunction a day later, starting a new cycle. And as I mentioned, the nodes were squared by Jupiter being out of sign square, but still within an orb. And Jupiter was the rule of the south node, which was the resolution, which was saying, look at the stories that are actually keeping us feel, attached to certain belief system that is not even working anymore, because Sun was at the time again in a closing phase. It was in a closing phase because Sun was in Scorpio and the nodes were still in a sign of Sagittarius and Gemini. So it was a closing phase. So that story again was showing us that this story is ending. It lost a meaning. It lost a meaning. The story that we've been saying to ourselves for past 2 years, that this is how things are. Of course, Uranus was already in a sign of Taurus, and actually Uranus was making an opposition to Mars. Uranus and Mars are not exactly in an opposition degree yet. But the interesting thing I want to mention is that the exact opposition between Mars and Uranus is going to happen on 11/11, which is 11/11 is the portal, it's the frequency of it's angelic frequency, it's the frequency of the universe that is allowing us to stream through new energies. So again, this is everything is coming around in cycles. There were obviously other things, but I don't want to obviously make this video about something that happened 2 years ago. And then during the solar eclipse, the first new moon in Taurus in 2022, April 2022, it happened in conjunction with Uranus. In conjunction with Uranus, again, massive change. Mercury was in a new phase conjunction with the North Node, already in a sign of Taurus at the time, and everything else was in a closing phase conjunction. The eclipse which happened on the North Node, the solar eclipse in Taurus in 2022, happened in a North Node in Taurus, something that we were growing into, learning about. And Uranus was in a closing phase conjunction with North Node, and the eclipse was in a closing phase conjunction with the North Node. It happened on the North Node, as I mentioned, and actually Uranus was in a new phase conjunction with the Sun and the Moon, so the eclipse. So this was saying that there was a beginning of the change, because something with regards to how we value ourselves, how we, relate to one another still, because Taurus and Libra are ruled by Venus, the same sign. And at the time, actually, funnily enough, Venus was in Pisces, in a closing phase. She was right sandwiched between Neptune and Jupiter. She was in a new phase with Neptune. So we were looking for a deeper meaning. Venus is exalted in Pisces. She's like, she wants this unconditional love, and Venus was in a closing phase conjunction with Jupiter. Again, telling us that these old values, these values, even though it was the North Node in Taurus, Venus was saying that this belief system we have with regards to what matters, what is important, it's ending. It was ending. And Venus, actually, there was this sextile going on from Pisces to obviously everything in the sign of Taurus. Yeah, Venus was actually, it was kind of out of orb, but she was kind of sextile in the South Node. So there was all, and also Venus was making almost an exact sextile to Pluto. The Venus-Jupiter conjunction, which was literally almost exact, 1 minute apart, Venus-Jupiter conjunction. So Venus was just holding on, like, okay, let me not conjunct Jupiter and start a new cycle, because I need to draw home this point that this story has to end. And it was being sextiled by Pluto at the time, retrograde, obviously in Capricorn. So this was all supporting us on this journey, and that takes us to now, present moment, which is the final lunar eclipse in Taurus for another 9 years. I think the next one will be in 2031 or something like that. 2031 I think is the next one. Don't hold me to that. I don't have it in my notes. I can't remember all these numbers, but I believe it's 2031 the next one. So anyway, this is the last one, and that will be obviously with the nodes being reversed. So the south node will be in Taurus. So once again, this brings us back to the current date, which is not today, which I'm talking about the eclipse date, which will be taking place on October 28th. And what is interesting, obviously, is that this eclipse is happening. Moon is obviously kind of still in a it's kind of a little bit far from the North Node. It's 11 degrees away, but it's still happening, closer to the North Node than the South Node, because it's in opposition to Scorpio. But Moon is actually in a closing phase to Jupiter. You can't make this up. Seriously, I'm not kidding. You can't make this up. So the first eclipse in Taurus happens with the Jupiter squaring the nodes, resolution South Node being ruled by Jupiter because it was in the sign of Sagittarius. And now we have this last eclipse in the sign of Taurus, the lunar full moon, which is like an illumination. We're supposed to have the aha moment of these past 2 years, what's been culminating for us. And Moon is in a closing phase conjunction with Jupiter retrograde that just made a trine to Venus, which is the rule of the resolution node of Pluto squaring the nodes this year. And Pluto is squaring the nodes. There is no dilly-dallying. It's not Jupiter. It's Pluto. Pluto is like, these guys have to change. It's done. It's done. Like, this way of being on this planet is stifling our evolution. This way of relating, this way of repeating the same old cycles. And I'm part of it. I'm not saying that I got it figured out and, oh, look at me, like I'm like holier than thou. Like, no. We are all co-creating this reality. And this Jupiter, its moon is in a closing phase to Jupiter, in a closing phase conjunction. And Jupiter, as we know, is in a closing phase conjunction with Uranus. And Uranus is already within the degree of the trine to Venus, which will be becoming exact on a Halloween, on the 31st, as I already mentioned. There is still this beautiful sextile from each side between Uranus and Neptune and Pluto. And actually, Saturn is still making a sextile to this eclipse, because Saturn is still retrograde, but it is within 5-degree orb between the Moon and the Saturn. So Saturn is supporting this eclipse, which is again during the time of the first eclipse in Taurus in 2021. Saturn was in Aquarius, so it was showing us what was dysfunctional, what was outdated, what lost meaning, what was not going to support us going forward because we externalize our power. Pluto was retrograde in Capricorn, right? Well, not during the eclipse. During the eclipse, actually, the first one, Pluto was direct, but it was in Capricorn, so ruled by Saturn. And now we have Saturn, again, playing a role during this eclipse, making a sextile, positive aspect. And between Moon and Saturn, this is the first, like the crescent, the waxing crescent, right? So it's gaining the light, we're starting to understand. And yeah, on the side of the Scorpio, as I mentioned, we already had the South Node, Sun and South Node Mercury conjunction. There is a new phase conjunction between Sun and Mercury. There is a closing phase conjunction between Mercury and Mars, because the exact conjunction will take place the day later. And also the conjunction between Sun and Mars will take place on November 18th in the sign of Scorpio. So all these endings and new beginnings with regards to how do we communicate, how do we think and perceive the reality. Are we allowing ourselves to actually talk about things that really matter? With this Scorpio, are we actually going deep and talking about the things that really matter, or is it all just superficial to keep ourselves safe? And it's in a closing phase to Mars. Mars in Scorpio is powerful, because in the traditional astrology, Mars was the ruler of Scorpio. In the modern, it's Pluto, but in traditional, and that's still valid, it's Mars. And Mars being in a Scorpio is opposing it's opposing this eclipse. It's conjuncting Sun, opposing Moon. So again, there is a point of integration. And yeah, Venus is also making a sextile to Mars. Well, I mean, it's kind of out of degree. Venus is making an exact sextile to Ceres, the asteroid Ceres, interestingly enough, exactly the same degree. But yeah, Venus is making... Yeah, I mean, it's too far from the degree, but I guess because Venus is playing such an important role. More important is that Venus is still trining Jupiter, because she's obviously having the Jupiter conjunction today, which is Sunday, 6 days before the eclipse, and she is preparing for her exact trine to Uranus, but already valid, and Venus is the ruler of Uranus. So whatever Venus had learned and then applied, so she learned during her stint in Leo and her retrograde in Leo, and then now is applying in Virgo, the practical application. Until recently, Venus and Mercury had a mutual reception, because Mercury was in a sign of Libra, but it's not anymore. As of today, when I'm recording this video, Mercury is going to be in a sign of Scorpio, and during the eclipse, it is in a sign of Scorpio. But the other thing is that Saturn is actually making a trine. Let's see. Pisces, Scorpio. Yes, Saturn is making a trine to the eclipse. So again, this is a very, very positive aspect. It doesn't necessarily... This is the thing. With evolutionary astrology, all this harmonious aspect, it doesn't mean they're gonna feel good. It doesn't mean that it's gonna be all rainbow as butterflies. What it means that this is a supporting aspect that is supporting us on our evolutionary path. So whatever is taking place is being applied into manifestation in an easier way. So it's like people are ready for it. There is less resistance. The energy is ready to stream through, but it doesn't mean it's gonna be easy or comfortable or like all harmonious, like not necessarily. So Saturn being in a sign of Pisces and making a trine to this eclipse is obviously supporting the process of letting go that which no longer serves us. And also with Scorpio, like if you really look deeply at the sign of Scorpio, and now Sun being in the sign of Scorpio, Scorpio is telling us about what needs to die. It's the sign of transformation. It's a sign of transmutation, because in many cases, that which is left after the Tower moment, after the Scorpio process, is not the same thing that it was going into it. It's something completely different. So having the full moon in Taurus, under the influence of everything that's going on, and I'm going to be diving deeper into the astrology, so you can see a chart with my friends during our collaboration. So that will be coming up later on this week. But I just wanted to more bring this into the practical. Like, I mean, we already talk about everything else that's going on there. We know that the North Node is in a closing phase with Chiron that is going to take place in February next year, and I can tell you the exact transits that are going to become, as I mentioned, Venus, Uranus are going to become exact on a 31st, on a Halloween day, but it's already valid. Sun, Mars, I already mentioned, the exact conjunction will be happening on November 18th, but it's already valid during the time of the eclipse. So this is again going to start a new cycle between the two, but it's going to put Mars behind Sun, so it will be a closing phase conjunction actually. And Sun is going to... Sun is obviously making... What is Sun making to Pluto? Yeah, there is a square. So Pluto is still squaring this eclipse, even though it is an out of sign square. As we know, Pluto was square in the Libra eclipse and pointing to the south node, and the Libra eclipse was happening on the south node, but everything was still in a closing phase, so it was saying that things are culminating. But now Pluto is square in the eclipse, but because between Sun and Pluto there is Sun is always the center, so you can say that this is a first quarter square. In any case, the conjunction between the two, between Sun and Pluto, as I already mentioned in my short videos on Instagram, will be happening on 22nd of January on a 29 degrees and 59 minutes, literally 1 minute away from Sun entering into the sign of Aquarius, which I feel is again very profound, and is again building up layers of this eclipse and what's actually being shown to us here. So yeah, let me just finish this transit. So the Sun is actually coming into the opposition with Jupiter. It's already within the degree. So, you know, because Jupiter and Moon are in a closing phase conjunction, Moon is in a closing phase conjunction, so Jupiter is playing a role in this eclipse, and Sun and Moon are in opposition. Sun is actually already opposing Jupiter, so Jupiter is challenging us because it's still retrograde, and it's saying we still have to reevaluate this story of survival, this story of what matters. Uranus has been helping us to do that since 2018, since he's been in a sign of Taurus. Uranus is still retrograde as well. He will be the last one to turn direct at the end of January next year. So yeah, Sun is in a position with Jupiter. The exact will take place on November 3rd. So all this will be, you know, like the after effects of eclipse. Next week when I'll be making a video, I'll be telling you the same thing, that actually all these aspects are becoming exact a week after the eclipse. Most of them, obviously, some of them already took place. Like, you know, Sun square to Pluto happened yesterday, Saturday. So then we have Venus in opposition with Neptune. Venus is in opposition with Neptune. So actually we have once again this kite being present in a sky, because Venus is also coming into her exact trine to Pluto, which will take place. So the exact opposition between Venus and Neptune is happening on the 4th, November 4th, and the exact trine between Venus and Pluto will be happening on, I have here November 28th. That should be correct. Yeah, 1 month later. And then Mars is in opposition with Uranus. So again, this is interesting because, as I mentioned, during the first eclipse in Taurus, we had also Uranus-Mars opposition, but in this case, exact opposition between Mars and Uranus will be happening on 11/11. But it's already within a degree because it's 10 degrees apart. They are 10 degrees apart. So yeah, so we have all these things, but practically what all this means, because I know that this is just like too much information and people are getting lost potentially, because there is so many things in opposition, closing and ending, and only Pluto is like there on the side squaring the party, like, yep, I'm going to keep putting the pressure on you guys because you know things have to change. You know things have to change. It's not possible to go any further with the way humanity has to evolve and the way how things change because of the Aquarian age, because of Pluto moving into the sign of Aquarius, which is going to accelerate everything. And I always say that if, you know, like as this linear time is becoming so non-linear, even in three-dimensional reality, especially now Saturn being in a sign of Pisces and making all these positive aspects to this lunar eclipse, things are not being so tangible anymore. Like, and also the intangible is manifesting very quickly. So as I was trying to explain previously, was that if we don't resolve our stuff, you know, and this is obviously coming from inside of each and every single one of us because we create a collective, these things are now manifesting much faster because there is the time lapse between when we want something to happen and when it's happening is getting shorter because everything is accelerating. And now with Pluto being direct and Pluto just about to go back into Aquarius in January, things are going to start accelerating again. And Pluto will go back into Capricorn just one more time for 2 months. So we don't have that much time to make all these adjustments because things are quickly changing. And it is very taxing for human body because it's an overload on our nervous system because there's so much happening at the same time. And that's why I feel during the summer, when we had like literally almost every single planet in retrograde apart from Mars, there was an opportunity to kind of slow down, to go within. Now still some of the planets are retrograde, all of them are the outer planets, but things are gaining momentum. And even though now we're going into Scorpio season, which will give us the opportunity for go inwards again to integrate, digest and integrate this energy, because as I said, with the full moon there will be some clarity for sure. There will be more clarity also because Sun and Mercury, Mercury is already in the new phase with Sun, and Mercury will have the conjunction with Mars the day later, which will pass the information on to Mars, whatever information was passed on between Sun and Mercury, still in the sign of Libra, right, about relationships and the way we relate and the way that world is not balanced. There is no balance and harmony at the moment because it's always win and lose. It's win and lose. There is no win-win. So this is going to be passed on to Mars. Mars is in a rulership and he's going to go, okay, what are we going to do about it now? And then there will be a new phase conjunction between Mercury and Mars, creating again a new storyline of how are we going to become stronger? How are we going to become more resilient? How are we going to take our power back so we stop externalizing it, because Pluto is in Capricorn. And then we won't need to project all these unmet needs onto others. So practically what all this is leading me to actually say, all this stuff that I just said, which actually probably just goes right over people's head, today, just after I got out of shower, because this is when things usually happen. It's, either when you're doing yoga or going for a walk or doing something completely mundane, like folding laundry or taking a shower, right? I got a strong guidance from the spirit, strong urge to go and listen to the Earth Song. And this is how I'm going to call this video, Listen to the Earth Song from Michael Jackson. And I remember even, and I'm getting goosebumps, so Spirit is confirming. So literally, this whole video is literally about the Earth Song. So you can just forget about everything I just said, because everything is explained in the song Earth Song from Michael Jackson, which is like 14 years old at this point, right? I don't even know what was happening in the sky at the time because I was asleep. I didn't even know astrology. So anyway, all that said, going back to Michael Jackson and Earth Song, I remember even when I was a kid, every time I would listen to that song, and this is going back a long time ago. I mean, I was, actually the song is much longer than that. I know the video I watched was uploaded 14 years ago, but the song must be much older than, it must be like, I don't know, it must be about 25, 30 years old, no? Because I was a kid. I remember I was a kid when I saw this song for the first time. And every single time, actually, it might be when the notes were in Aries and Libra. I wouldn't be surprised. 19 years ago, yeah, when the notes were in the same place for the previous cycle, North Node in Aries, I would not be surprised. So, anyway, no, it would have been even before that. Maybe they were reversed. Again, I'm just digging myself in a hole. I don't know what was going on astrologically when the Earth Song was released, okay? But I was being strongly guided to go and listen to this song. And I remember even when I was a kid and I listened to this song for the first time, it made me cry. Literally, even now, I had to try to stay composed because I'm like, I need to record this video. I cannot look like a mess. But I was literally like every single time, and even I don't even need to watch the pictures because I know what's going on in that video. I don't even need to watch it. And even now, like talking about it, I'm getting emotional. Every single time, without a failure, I watch that song, I cry, or I want to cry every single time. And I know it's also because these of you who understand when the clarion call sounded and someone put the hands up and said, okay, I'll go to planet Earth and I help. And then when we got here, we were like, what the hell was I thinking? Why did I do that? And stuff. And and that was the same. That's why I made a video about the Avatar early on this year, which I went to see 2 times. No, was it 3 times? 2 times. 3 times. I went to see it plenty times. And each time I was crying as well. Because it was reminded me of my, very likely, my lifetime in Lemuria. And then, Earth Song, Avatar, all these kind of things, which are showing us the extreme imbalance between nature and humans, and like how extremely far we strayed from the middle ground, right? From the point of neutrality, from the point of balance. And this is why, even with my personal astrological share, you know, my story that I'm talking about, my life, which is probably boring for most people, and I'm pretty much doing it for myself, just to have my own counseling session with myself. But if it's helpful to others, I'm very glad. I'm very glad, but I feel it's very helpful for me to talk about it. And perhaps, you know, like I said, people need to hear that, or maybe it just needs to be put out there into the ether, into the Akash. But all that said, every single time when these things, I'm being reminded of these things, it just breaks my heart. And I really feel that with what's going on now and this full moon in Taurus, I feel this earth song, it's so strongly connected to this full moon lunar eclipse in Taurus. Because, I mean, you can think what was happening in your life in, you know, November 2021. But of course, this is cycles in cycles. You know, this didn't start in 2021. But this first Taurus eclipse was in 2021, November 2021. And based on the astrology and this Jupiter playing a big role, and Jupiter playing a big role now, being in conjunction with Moon, there is this story that we live by, that is being passed on from generation to generation, whether the story is connected, you know, obviously it's connected to something we value, that we think we need to survive, because it's Taurus, right? Preservation, survival, and our relationship to ourselves, how strongly we are attached, Moon, you know, your ego identity, how strongly we are attached to this story. You know, and that's what we can see manifested in an extreme way in the world. I'm sure it's also in your personal lives. I know it's in mine. I can experience that in my reality every day over here. And it really is manifesting, and we cannot ignore it anymore. So the bottom line is that what is this story, this dysfunctional story, this toxic story that has been passed on? It wasn't always that toxic, but now with Saturn in Pisces, it said that this story, and Jupiter now being in Taurus, Jupiter already was in Pisces and in Aries, it's saying that it's a time to actually adopt a story that is true to you. True to you, what do you value? What matters to you? Uranus being a sign of a Taurus is saying, well, we need to really reevaluate and upgrade and go beyond what is just you, you know, going also towards that actually we are part of something much bigger than just my little reality. But yes, we are still a unique expression of the source, coming here to fulfill our purpose by being you, by doing exactly what feels in alignment with who you are, based on your needs, values, and your relationship to yourself and your own sense of self-worth, which is what, with Venus in Virgo, most people are being triggered, you know, and reminded of, that they need to heal because of the Virgo archetype, learning an adjustment, the hero's journey. We didn't come here to be perfect. We came here to have an experience and, you know, be the best version of ourselves that we can be, without beating ourselves up about it, but just accepting that there is no perfection in this, you know, in this world. There are some things that look perfect, but everything has its purpose. So anyway, I feel that I'm just like going back and forth and maybe not even hitting the nail on a head, but literally this earth song and this lunar eclipse in Taurus, to me, are saying the same story, which is the story of humanity, and the human collective is made of individuals. So I'm not saying about something abstract, some crowd out there, outside of me, that like got it wrong. This is not what I'm talking about, because that's again Virgo being judgmental and like, yeah, you have to sort yourself out. There's something wrong with you. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that each and every single one of us are creating a society, a culture, a religion, a group, a whatever, and a human collective on the planet Earth. You know, we are all one family called human collective on planet Earth. There is no separation and division, because we are all part of being a citizen on planet Earth, right? So we've gone so far from actually understanding that. And I'm not saying that this is everybody's story, okay? This is just my perception of reality. This is what I'm tapping into energetically, is that we swayed so far off the center that there is such an extreme imbalance now that we need to learn to put it back into balance. And that's why the extreme and the situations we are experiencing in our personal life and in the world are going to become more extreme, because they need balance, and the balance actually comes in, like, Venus in Virgo, discernment, healing. Also, what really matters, it's an earth sign, again. This beautiful kite is being present during, it wasn't present during this Libra eclipse, but it's present again now, because now Venus is in a place where Mercury was twice, because it was retrograde and then it was direct. Sun was during all these lunations we had going on during the Virgo season and before. Yeah, it was like 4 of them, ending with the full moon in Aries. And now it's again we have this kite, this divine blessing, this earth trine, this beautiful earth trine between Venus, Uranus, Venus and Pluto. And there is a trine between Pluto and Uranus, and then the roof pointing to Neptune, from Uranus to Neptune and from Pluto to Neptune, which creates the kite. So again, anything and everything that's going on in the world right now, whether it's your personal life or the collective experience, is divinely orchestrated, even though it makes no sense. And I know this might trigger a lot of people, but it has to happen. It has to take place. It's very, very, very unfortunate that it's happening in the way it's happening, and so many people are, being having this experience. Which again, the question strikes, why would the soul chose that experience? Because nothing is random in the universe. And again, I know I'm walking on a very thin ice now, because a lot of people might get triggered. And I totally understand, because for me right now, I'm safe. I'm not hungry. I'm warm. And I'm not having that experience right now. Doesn't mean I won't have that experience tomorrow or next week. But right now, I'm okay. And I can have a love and compassion and admire the courage of the souls who are having this experience. But if you look at it from the higher perspective, these souls also put their hand up to say, I'll be the volunteer, because based on the experience I'll be having, the world will be reminded of the extreme and how far we went off the balance. But there is no balance between us and nature. In not everyone, again, there are an exception. There are people who live in the nature, they live in alignment with nature. There are still, like Aboriginal people and people who understand. And I'm not, look at me, I'm living in a block of flats at the moment. I am not in the nature, living in a balance with nature. Everything that I consume is from the grocery store, So again, like I am, I would be the worst hypocrite if I said, oh yeah, I have it all figured out. Like, no, I don't. But I know that there are people who had figured it out, and they are living more balanced life, and also they are less triggered by the external, which again, as I confessed many times, I am still trying to master the point of neutrality, where the external doesn't affect my equilibrium to the point where I am really affected. And that is my responsibility. How much power do I give the external to unbalance my inner peace? Because if I lose my inner peace, then I cannot help anyone else, right? So anyway, that is conversation for another rabbit hole. And I need to start wrapping this up, because I'm almost 3/4 of an hour again. But yeah, these earth songs, seriously guys, it explains everything. It explains all the astrological transit, everything that's going on in the sky right now. If you watch the song and listen to the lyrics of the earth song from Michael Jackson, it explains everything. Everything is explained in that song. You don't need to know astrology. You don't even need to know what's going on in the sky. You don't need to know nothing. About astrology, aspects, phases, none of that matters. If you listen to that song, you will understand everything. You don't need to know astrology. So yeah, so this is what I really, this was the whole point of this long video, was this message that actually this full moon in Taurus is trying to help us to see what really matters, and how we have gone so far off the balance from what really matters, because we are one human collective, all of us, regardless of race, religion, culture, color of skin, age, sex, sexual orientation, preference. It doesn't matter. None of these matter, because in essence, we all came from the same place. We all returned to the same place. We were all made of love, and we go back to love, right? And everything in between is just the details of our unique experience, unique expression of the source. Which, yes, we can put any label on that, but in essence, it doesn't diminish that on a soul level, we are all the same, coming from the same place. We are just having a unique experience right here, right now. 11:11, again, I can't believe this. Every time I'm making this video, there's 11:11. And it's 42, 44, 44, 44, just as I said it on my recording. You can't make this up. Seriously, you can't make this up. So yeah, I now completely lost the track, but perhaps that was meant to happen with the spirit, you know, always interfering at the right and perfect moment. But yeah, this is pretty much what is taking place in the world. This is what's taking place, very likely in many people's personal experience. When things are getting out of balance, they become more extreme. I know a lot of people are struggling on many levels, you know, whether it's material, physical, health, relationship, whatever it is. And this is all just showing us that things needs to come back to balance, but they're not going to come back to balance for us to look for it externally, because it started at, it will only be balanced in the internal. And this is how we're going to change the world. And that's why, you know, like if people see this song, I'm sure that for most people, something will move within them, because there is that memory, there is that soul memory that this is what really matters, and it always had, and it always will. None of that, you know, it doesn't matter how much money you have in a bank account. But I mean, who cares when there will be nothing to eat, when there will be no trees to give you oxygen, if there will be no clean water, who cares? But not saying that it doesn't matter, because of course we need to survive, right? We need resources. But I just feel that right now, the priorities that most people feel that matter, or, you know, like the stories that we tell ourselves or society tells us that this is what matters, does it really? You know, so this is where it's the time to ask questions, because Mercury is in Scorpio as of today, and during the time of eclipse, it's just about to hit Mars. But actually, yes, Mercury will be opposing Jupiter. Good spirit, thank you for telling me that. Yeah, Jupiter actually, Mars is in the exact opposition with Jupiter, and Mercury is like literally one day away, you know. So both Mars and Mercury are in opposition with Jupiter. So this is exactly, yes, thank you, spirit, thank you for telling me. Yes, how do we, you know, like what do we identify that really matters? And this is why with the Scorpio energy, we need to really go deep and investigate and ask questions and reevaluate. And the point of integration is to try to establish balance. Majority of things happening in the sky are in opposition, you know, that's where the world is at. It's in opposition, you know. There is always the enemy. There is always two groups. There is always yes and no. There is always this pro and against, and you are the right and you are the wrong, and whatever it is. But is it really? Because in the essence, we are not that different. We all came from the same place, returned to the same place. Everything in between is just details. So anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it at that. I don't know. This was a little bit unusual video. I knew it would be. Yeah, if you feel inspired, if you're watching still, obviously, 50 minutes almost in, go and listen to Michael Jackson Earth songs. And yeah, just inquire in your own inner world, because it's Scorpio energy. Nobody can give you the answers, because at the end of the day, the external authority is failing, because there is nothing new under the sun, and all the reactions to the problems we have in the world, if they are if you try to resolve them in the same old way, right? Isn't it like Einstein said, you know, that it's all the definition of insanity, trying to resolve the problem from the same place where the problem was created, or doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. Isn't that insane? And isn't that what's happening? So how can we make a different choice under all circumstances, right? My teacher's favorite phrase, which I adopted. So this is it. I'll leave it at this. This is more than I had to say, obviously, as usual. But yeah, if you would like to understand this lunar eclipse, just go and listen to the Earth song from Michael Jackson, and you will understand everything, because that's exactly what this eclipse is about. Okay, I wish you all a beautiful rest of the day whenever you're watching this. Have a blessed week. It is all a preparation for the eclipse, and as I mentioned, most of the aspects happening during the eclipse will be happening exact after the eclipse. So it's like riding the wave and having certain realizations and reevaluating and questioning everything. Okay, much love, guys. I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.